Hello, everybody. It is Summer B, and that means it's time for you to take the course COM 4330, History of Mass Communication. And I've just put together this quick PowerPoint that would go over some of the basics of the course and talk about what will be expected out of you and what you can expect out of me for the next roughly 4.5 weeks of class, which is not a very long period of time. More on that in a second. So we're going to throw things over to the, right screen, which would be this right here, and let's do that. And suddenly, you should be able to see the PowerPoint. Okay, this is, like I said, COM 4330, History of Mass Communication, and I'm really excited to be teaching you this class this summer. If we think about what this class is going to be, this class is about making the connection between historical happenings and current events. It's drawing a line between things in mass communication that happened long ago, sometimes centuries and centuries ago, and we can actually pinpoint how things that happened back then have impacted how we view and use mass communication now. Nearly everything going on in society now, we can track back to some way it's been in mass communication beforehand, like questions over how the press are covering massive protests against police violence. This is the same kind of thing we have been seeing for years, questions of how the press does and should be covering these issues. If we think about the ever-present problem of COVID-19 and the way that that has impacted probably all of us who are taking this class right now, we can look back to the way that the press covered the Spanish flu of 1918, which was a massive flu epidemic that killed tons of people across the globe, very similar to what we have now with coronavirus, although in 1918, the Spanish flu was much more deadly. We can look at how the press covered that, not just from the standpoint purely of journalists. So we can see the example there of the Seattle Daily Times with their headline that churches, schools, and shows are closed, to the early beginnings of like health-based PSAs and health-based advertising. This was a clip from the Berkeley Daily Gazette in Berkeley, California on the right that's saying, as a PSA, please wear a mask in public. That a gauze mask is proof against influenza. For the sake of everybody, please wear a face covering. And these are things that folks in mass communication are still struggling with now. How do we put out good, positive messaging that conveys to people the importance and the need to wear a face covering around people or to socially distance? We'll talk a lot about that, or you'll see connections about that moving forward through this class. Everything that is old is new once again, just sometimes in different ways. Another part of this class is going to be arming you with the tools you need to perform proper historical analysis. So you're going to be doing a research paper in this class. More on that here in a couple slides. And the research paper is designed to teach you how to analyze history through a set of certain methodologies, which we will be talking about in this class. And if you combine these two things, one being the knowledge and respect of the idea that mass communication is often cyclical and the history of mass communication comes right around back to our modern times. If you combine that with the tool set of researching history and knowing how to analyze things from a historical standpoint, you get a really powerful sense of not just being able to see where mass communication has been, but where it's going based off of what we know from where it's been. And it doesn't matter what you want to get into, whether you're a journalist or whether you're public relations or advertising or a filmmaker, or you're into broadcasting or you're into music, no matter what your area of mass communication is, that's a really powerful thing to be able to connect where something has been in its history to where it is and where it is going to be going soon. And just as a quick caveat, this class early on and as things progress tends to be a little journalism heavy. And I know not everybody in this class is an MMJ student or an MMFP student on the TV broadcasting news side of things. And so if you are someone from the film side of things, or you're somebody from broadcasting or music, or you're somebody from public relations, we will get around to your areas. Trust me. We will get to how the history of mass communication fits in with these things. The issue is that the printing press was sort of the first thing out of the gate, and as such, a lot of what we talk about when we talk about the history of mass communication is the history of journalism and news. Although this is not a history of journalism course, by default, the history of mass communication starts with journalism. So we are going to spend a lot of time, and the book spends a lot of time focusing on this from a journalism standpoint. If journalism's not your thing, just hold on. I promise we will get to the area that you are interested in. A little bit about me. I'm a former community journalist. I used to, or I'm from the Central Florida area, and I used to be a freelance reporter for the Seminole Chronicle. It's also an editor for the Seminole Chronicle, which is now out of money and is gone. The Winter Park Observer, I was a reporter for them as well. They are unfortunately out of money and gone. But I was also a reporter for the Orlando Business Journal, and they're still around. Thankfully. Keep your fingers crossed that I have not cursed them as well. And this kind of thing that I'm teaching you now, this respect for history, this seeing history as something to be discovered, and not just discovered, but analyzed and thought about and conveyed to other people, is something that is really near and dear to my heart. As a journalist, it was something I did a lot of. I was a historical reporter, primarily for the Winter Park Observer. Winter Park is an older railroad town in Central Florida, around where I'm from. And when the newspaper I was working for, the Winter Park Observer, tasked me with taking a look at the historical side of the Black community in Winter Park, which had historically been very segregated. And part of the reason why is that the area was being rapidly gentrified. If you don't know what gentrification is, I would encourage you to read up on the problem of gentrification. The area was being very heavily gentrified, and most of the other newspapers in the area were only covering it from the standpoint of, isn't this great for business? It's going to increase property values, and it'll be great for local businesses moving in, and it'll revitalize the area. No one was covering it from the standpoint of just asking the people who live there how they feel about their history being potentially erased. And so I got tasked with that, and I spent months and months and months putting together a 4-part, I think it ended up being somewhere around 3,500 word investigative series that was looking into the history of this segregated area in town. And so doing historical reporting and historical journalism is something that I did. And then once I left the journalism world and got into teaching and academia, history followed me there, and I decided, hey, I can just do research looking at history of stuff I think is cool. And I've always really liked NASA and 1960s and 70s space program stuff, and so I decided, hey, I was going to do that. And I have since then had articles published looking into how the New York Times and how the national press covered some slightly less well-known NASA projects. So Gemini and Skylab are the two things I have focused on with that. So all of that to say, I love history. I like writing about history, like reading about history, and hopefully by the end of this, you will have that same sense. But if not, at least you'll have some respect for the notion of why we would study history. This being an online class means that I can't have office hours in person. Also, we have a global respiratory pandemic, which means even if we did meet in person, we wouldn't probably have real office hours. So instead, we're going to be using Skype for office hours. I will be online every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning from 9 a.m. until 10 a.m. So for 1 hour, 3 times a week. And my Skype username is my full name, which is Jeffrey K. Riley, Jeffrey Kriley. Log into Skype between 9 and 10 in the morning on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you can use either the typing chat system. You can call in, or you can do a video chat. I don't care which one you use. And that's if you have a question for me that is really pressing and you feel like it would take a long time to explain via email. Feel free to use Skype to quickly ask me that, either chatting or over the video phone, whatever. We're not going to use Zoom just because it takes a little more time to set up 3 days a week than I really want to. If this time does not work for you, please keep in mind that I can set up times outside of this. This is just going to be the standard times. And also, email is really the best way to contact with me. It's just that it's occasionally you're going to have a question where the answer is going, or the process of asking the question will take a long time to type out, versus if you can just ask me in person over Skype, it'll run a little bit faster. So that is how we will do office hours. I already emailed you about the book about a month and a half ago because I really wanted to make sure nobody spent more money on the book than they needed to. The book is a big part of this class this summer. The weekly assignments, both in terms of the key points and the quizzes, more on that in a second, are all going to come out of this book. So yes, the book is mandatory. You do need to buy it. The good news is that it is not terribly expensive to rent this book. Through Amazon, I believe it costs $23 to rent it for the summer. Actually, you get it through October. So if you really like it and want to keep revisiting it, you'll have until then to do it. If you rent it, like I suggested, through Amazon, then you will need to load the Amazon for PC app, which I have written instructions on the Folio site for you how to do that. You can also load it for Mac if you have a Mac laptop or desktop. You can load the Kindle for Mac app. And then if you want to do it on the go, there are also apps that I have links for and I have posted that are the Kindle app for iOS. So if you have an iPhone, or Android if you have an Android. And then you can read the book on your phone. Ironically, the only place you can't read the book is on an actual Amazon Kindle. But that's fine because the Kindle's never been great for looking at textbooks anyway. If you load the app, what you get is sort of an interactive piece of software, which you can then use to go through the pages of the book. It's got places where you can do highlights and make notes in electronic margins. The Kindle app for PC and for Mac and for the two smartphones is actually really nice. It's the way that textbooks online should have been doing their setup for a while now. There's another option through the campus bookstore that's called, I think, Red Shelf or something like that. It's got red in the name. That app I've never used and I have never touched, and I don't have access to it. So if you go that route, that's cool. I won't be able to help you much. I've already had at least one student tell me that they had a real problem trying to get the bookstore to even process their purchase for the book. If you run into problems, just go through Amazon. It is $3 cheaper, and I think probably, even though I've never touched the other software, I think it's probably going to be an easier and better way of accessing the book. For grades, the whole class is out of 650 points. And here's how those 650 points break down. 5 key points assignments for 30 points each for 150 points. 4 short answer quizzes. Those are 50 points each for 200 points total. And 3 research checkpoints. That are 25 points each for 75 points. Those are more or less your weekly assignments. There's 3 research checkpoints. You won't have one the first week, but you'll have one every week after that. Key points, we start the very first week and we go the whole time, and then the short answer quizzes start and very soon in the class. Those are more or less your 3 weekly assignments. The 2 big single assignments are the research paper, which is worth 125 points, and the final exam, which is worth 100 points. Now let's talk about each one of these 5 things. The first is the key points. This is the thing that will likely be the thing that you work on the most in terms of thinking about throughout the shortened summer semester. The key points are where you will read the chapters you have been assigned for that given week. And if you don't know where to find where the reading chapters are, they're under the schedule, which is in the syllabus part of the Folio class. You're going to read those chapters, and from each of the chapters that you were assigned that week, you're going to type out the 5 key points. The key points are the 5 biggest things, most important things that chapter talked about. And on most weeks, you have 3 assigned reading chapters, which means you'll be typing out a total of 15 key points, 5 for each chapter. There's instructions specific to the key points assignments that tells you a little bit more about like ideas, how to think about the right ideas. Those are also on Folio. One of the big last things I want to say about this assignment is that of the 15 total points that you'll turn in, key points you'll turn in most weeks, 5 of those I would like you to convert to questions. And you can pick and choose which 5 you want to make questions as opposed to key point statements. But 5 of them out of the total 15, write those in the form of a question. And these are going to be due every Wednesday of every week by noon. Now, I know a lot of you who have taken classes with me before are used to 11:59 p.m. deadlines. In the summertime, I use noon deadlines, and that's so that the day that things get turned in, I can actually start going in and grading them and get you feedback on them. Summer classes are really fast, and so I need to get on that sooner rather than later, so a noon deadline lets me start grading them the same day. The next are the quizzes. The quizzes are short answer quizzes. Each quiz is going to be 5 questions long, and those questions will be answered like you would imagine as short answers. Each quiz or each question may have some subparts to them, and you may have to answer those as well. And in this case, we are defining short answer as at least 3 full sentences. If you want to write more than that, that is totally fine, but at the minimum, you need 3 full sentences. And an example that I use for this would be like, hey, let's say you're pointing out, or one of the points you wanted to make is that yellow journalism in turn of the century muckraking, which was investigative journalism, changed or how the world of muckraking changed the world of medicine. That could be one of the questions. The answer, you could answer it made medicine safer, but that doesn't really get to the how and why. It's correct, but not really. Instead, you would say something in 3 sentences like, investigative journalism looked at the ingredients that were on medicine at the time because medicine was entirely unregulated. They found that most medicines at the time were one of 3 ingredients, and sometimes 3 ingredients mixed together, and that was pure grain alcohol, so moonshine, cocaine, liquefied cocaine, and then either liquefied heroin or a new ingredient that had been invented called codeine that was supposed to be safer in theory than heroin. And it turns out if you mix pure grain alcohol and liquefied cocaine and liquefied heroin together in a little glass and you drink it, it does make you feel better, but you don't fix anything. It's not really medicine. That's just a side tangent. So that's 2 sentences, and your 3rd sentence would be, as these stories became popular, Congress was pressured by the public to enforce regulations on medicine labeling. Those 3 sentences explain the how and the why. What I want you to do when you're answering these short answers, answer questions for these quizzes, is focus very much on the how and the why. These will be due every Friday by noon. So if the key points are due Wednesday, the quizzes are due Friday, also by noon, so that I can get a jump on grading them and have them hopefully graded before you go into the weekend so that you know where your grade stands. The research checkpoints. These are smaller assignments that I built out of the larger research paper assignment because I wanted to make sure that I could keep an eye on the progress of the work you're doing because we only have 5 weeks to deal with. It'll be better if I can know that you're on the right path as we go. So week 2, I'm going to ask you to turn in your research paper idea. That's your topic, the thing that you want to do your paper about. More on the actual paper itself in a second, plus 5 citations that prove to me that you have looked enough to know that there are citations out there for this research topic. Week 3, you're going to turn in a list of 8 more citations written in proper APA format. The whole paper does need to be done in APA. Note that's not AP, that's not Associated Press, that's APA, which is American Psychological Association. And then week 4, I'm going to ask you to turn in the first page of the paper and the last page of the paper. Now that may seem strange as to why you're being asked to turn in the last page of a paper before it's due. And that's because I want to make sure that you are thinking about where you're going in this paper. And if you can prove to me that you've thought about what your last page will be, that'll help me out a lot in knowing that. And these checkpoints will be due on Tuesdays by noon. And about the research paper itself, I'm looking for a 10 to 12 page historical analysis of any topic that involves mass communication to some extent and is more than 10 years old. So you need to go at least back to 2010 or earlier for whatever it is you want to choose to write about. Like I said, it's going to be done in APA format, and I have posted a bunch of sourcing guides that I'll actually make a different video for and post that. And the whole thing is going to be due at the end of the semester, July 20th, which is the Monday of the last week, by 5 p.m. The only thing not due by noon is the final paper, which will be due by 5 p.m. that day. And just a couple more pieces of information about the research paper, since that's the thing that tends to scare students the most, because 10 to 12 pages is a lot to write over the course of 4.5 to 5 weeks. The topic is entirely up to you, so find something that you are genuinely interested by. But think about how you're going to approach that. You could compare things, right? You could compare 2 or more media outlets' coverage of a single issue or topic or event. You could explore how the news media or specific kinds of press, of media, covered an event or an issue or a person that hasn't been written about that much. You could examine the business side of mass communication during a specific time. So especially those of you who are interested in music or film, the whole business side of that in history is really fascinating. As well as journalism. And then you could also analyze how a piece of new technology changed mass communication. So there's been examples in this class of people who have written about the influence of the development of the telegraph and how that changed geographical representation in news. If you can get news from farther away, you're more likely to have people who read that news and now know about stuff going on in other states. So thinking about this as sort of a way of thinking about how you approach the topic you choose. And then last but certainly not least, on the list of stuff you got to do in this class, we will have a final exam. It'll be 5 questions long. It'll be just like the regular quizzes, except the questions will be a little bit longer and more detailed, and I'm going to expect a little bit more out of the answer. So I think, if I remember right, I've said that each answer there needs to be about 100 words as opposed to just 3 sentences. And the final exam will be due, it'll be done July 23rd from 9 a.m. until noon. So that is the very last day, or that is the exam day for this course. So you have 3 hours from 9 a.m. to noon to take the exam. Moving on to some guidelines or some rules for the class. Late work won't be accepted because this class is only 4.5 weeks long, and that is a very, very, very small window to work in. Missing things is going to, or missing deadlines is going to be a 0, and that's because we just don't have time to build makeup assignments in this class. I know that sucks and seems really scary, that missing an assignment means an automatic 0, but that is the nature of a summer class. For absences, they're kind of weird because it's an online class, but there is a lot of stuff to do. If you know there's going to be a time where you're going to be away from the internet for a day and there's something due that day, go ahead and contact with me either at office hours or via email now, and we will build a way for you to turn that work in ahead of time. Now note, that means that you're going to need to turn work in ahead of time if you're going to miss, not afterwards. If you email me and say, hey, there's work due today, but I'm on this trip and I don't have internet, I can't do anything to help you and you'll have to take a 0 on that assignment. But if you let me know 3 weeks ahead of time, hey, I'm going to be gone this day, can I turn in the work a day or 2 early? Sure. I'd love to see that. That's great. And just as a general warning, this class is a lot of work in not a lot of time. You've heard me say that a couple times already. So don't let yourself fall behind. The number one thing that hurts students in this class is not keeping up with the schedule. So don't let yourself fall behind. And if you're taking a lot of classes this summer or you're working a full-time job, this might not be a good idea. And I'm not saying that because I think that you have some character flaw where you're not able to balance a schedule correctly. It's just that there's a lot of work in this class. A 10 to 12 page paper is a lot for a summer. So if you either start this course and realize, oh no, this is too much work for me, or you're looking at this now and realizing like, oh no, I probably won't be able to do this well, and you need to drop the course, that's not a character flaw. I don't think any less of you because of it. I realize that taking this big of a class, this sort of senior level history course combined with a very short schedule is difficult. Now that said, like I sort of mentioned a second ago, the number one thing that gets students in this class that will cause students not to pass is just not staying on top of the schedule. So build yourself a calendar, set alarms in your phone, knowing what days certain assignments are due. Know that key points are always going to be due on certain days. Quizzes are always going to be due on certain days. Those checkpoints are always going to be due on certain days. Build that into your schedule now. Set alarms for yourself. Put sticky notes up if you need to. Build that schedule for yourself. This class is, like it says, primarily self-guided. So you're going to be working on your own most of the time in producing this content. So make sure that you are setting a schedule for yourself. As scary as it seems, and as much as it can seem like a very daunting task right now, do keep in mind that a bunch of students every single summer take this course and pass it with flying colors and do really well. Some students don't, and oftentimes that's because they don't follow their own schedule. They don't make a schedule for themselves. So all of that to say this, which is this class is going to seem very difficult, but is also very doable. It is reading the textbook and posting the key points and taking quizzes based off of that textbook. And then it is the research paper and making sure that you are putting work step by step every single day, every single week towards getting that 10 to 12 page paper done. Now you'll have a series of follow-up videos from me that are talking about a couple of things. We're going to talk about the writing style of history research, how it sounds and what are some rules to it. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the tools that will be available to you for writing this paper in terms of help with citations and templates for citations. And then we'll talk about the method of history writing. So how, when you're performing historical analysis, how you talk about things and where you look and what kinds of sources you're going to need. We will talk about those in separate videos. So for now, I hope you will do me a couple favors. One, I hope you will look at the syllabus top to bottom and make sure that you don't have any questions there. And if you do, make sure you ask them. Take a look at the schedule and see if there's anything that looks like you will need to turn something in early, for example. And then go ahead and start thinking about what topic you would like to research in this class for your historical analysis paper. And with that, have a great first week of online classes.